Brief overview of today's presentation. So I'll give a very high-level overview of ABMI, Alberta Biodiversity Monitoring Institute. Then I'll touch on the ABMI's Geospatial Center approaches and products. And then I'll talk about human footprint for biodiversity monitoring. And then I'll provide some examples on human footprint mapping applications for the oil sands monitoring region. And then my last couple slides will discuss some new geospatial initiatives and applications of the human footprint that we're exploring as of now. So ABMI, who are we? The Alberta Biodiversity Monitoring Institute measures the state of Alberta's biodiversity and human footprint to support natural resource and land use decision making for the entire province of Alberta. And we track changes in over 2,000 species across the entire province of Alberta. So we are at arm's length a non-for-profit scientific organization, and the work that we do is jointly delivered by a number of organizations, including Innotech Alberta, former known as Alberta Innovates Technology Futures, Royal Alberta Museum, the University of Alberta, as well as University of Calgary. So there are There are 6 centers: monitoring center, it's boots on the ground; processing center, housed at the Royal Alberta Museum, so it's basically taking all the data that's been collected in the field by the monitoring center and then identifying the species; then information center, who is collecting the data and maintaining all the data; and then the science center, who is using the data for the scientific analysis; and then the geospatial center, we support all the geospatial needs across the entire ABMI, as well as working with a number of the stakeholders. And then the application center, who work, the staff of the center work directly with the stakeholders, trying to see how the data produced by ABMI could be used for their needs. So ABMI's Geospatial Center, which today I will be talking about, and I'll be talking about just one of the products that ABMI Geospatial Center produces. So we develop and implement methods to map and monitor changes in habitat and human footprint on provincial and sample-based scale. So there are 3 main initiatives within the Geospatial Center. One of them is human footprint mapping and monitoring, then the other one is land cover mapping, and the last one is research and development component, so it's trying to work on the newly emerging geospatial priorities. Today I'll be mostly talking about the human footprint. So the human footprint, or human land use, is the key driver of biodiversity change, which represents the backbone for ABMI's ability to report, to monitor and report on the changes in habitat and biodiversity in the entire province of Alberta. So the human footprint inventory is the only Alberta-wide inventory available that's available for 2007, 2010, 2012 conditions, and next month, in 3 weeks, we will be releasing the 2014 human footprint inventory. So ABMI defines human footprint as a temporary or permanent transformation of native ecosystem to support residential, recreational, or industrial land uses. And the final inventory consists of 21 sub-layers, as we call them, and those 21 sub-layers are based on the mapping of 86 human footprint feature types. And so the 2014 human footprint inventory has major enhancement through the work that we've been doing as part of the Alberta Human Footprint Monitoring Program, which is a collaboration between ABMI and Government of Alberta. So the next few slides, I'll be discussing overall applications of the human footprint for biodiversity monitoring, and I just have some summary tables and graphs, as well as neat-looking map, I think. So human footprint occupies about 1/3 of the province of Alberta, and on this map, it is reported as a percentage of land that's been modified by human use, ranging from 0, which is non-visible human footprint, to 100, which is completely modified human footprint. And the graph that you can see here, it's actually just a summary for 4 broad categories of the human footprint, which is agriculture human footprint, forestry footprint, energy footprint, and transportation footprint. So as of 2013, the trend for the human footprint demonstrated that there was a 3% increase from 1999. And agriculture represents 20%, which is basically 5 times higher than any human footprint types. And as you can see, it's actually relatively flat, so it hasn't been changing in terms of the area that much. Whereas forestry is demonstrated to be the fastest growing human footprint type. So the next few slides, I'll be talking about oil sands monitoring region. And the map here is demonstrate example of a heat map or density of occurrence for cut lines or seismic lines sublayer. It's one of those 21 sublayers in the human footprint inventory produced by ABMI. And so the oil sands region here actually includes the area that's covered by the oil sands deposit, but also a corner of the lower Athabasca region. And for the purpose of this presentation, I'll be using this boundary throughout the entire presentation when I'll be talking about the oil sands region. So the next few slides, I just wanted to show to demonstrate the value of understanding the data when doing the reporting. And I'll be providing an example on the oil sands region. And as you can see here, this is a map that's been clipped to the oil sands region. And this is 2012 human footprint inventory. And then the graph here demonstrates a percentage of the total human footprint, percentage as of the total human footprint for 5 categories. So one of them is agriculture, oops, wrong one. Agriculture, forestry, energy industry, urban, rural, and other industrial, and transportation. So for agriculture, the graphs demonstrate that 51%, about 52% of the total, as percent of the total human footprint was occupied by agriculture. And forestry is 23%, energy industry about 15%, urban, rural, and other is about 5%, and transportation is about 4%. And the map here also demonstrates, the percentage from 0 to 100% of the total human footprint in that region. So now here you can see the difference between the total human footprint and then the agriculture. It's only concentrated in those 2 corners in the southern and western part of the region. And again, just to remind you, agriculture occupies about 50% of the total human footprint in the region. That's demonstrated here. And then this is the forestry, which represents about 15% of the total human footprint. And this is the energy industry. So in terms of the area, it occupies only about 15%. But look how fragmented and how extensive the coverage is. And so that's why I wanted to make sure that, basically to make sure that we understand the value of the data when we're reporting. So the reporting is also depends on the application, and then you can see how different the data looks when it's mapped, basically. And this is the urban, rural, and other industrial, which covers about 5% of the total human footprint in the region. And the last one is the transportation. So in addition to wall-to-wall, what we call, so it's basically a seamless map of the entire human footprint, we also do a sample-based human footprint. And that data is actually mapped on a grid of the 3x7 sample sites that's evenly distributed across the entire province of Alberta. And the map here demonstrates just the area that covers the boundary of the oil sands region as I defined earlier. So that data is mapped annually as opposed to the inventory, which is a very rich data set and mapped well, the inventory is available every 2 years, but there is a lag of 2 years between the inventories as well. So, and the sample-based data is used so that we could use that for the trend analysis. So There is a little movie that I'd like to play because they say that picture words, 1,000 words. So just to show you the how those 3x7s look on the surface when they're mapped. And as you saw, the map was available for the entire province of Alberta, for the entire grid of those 3x7s. But the maps that were flown into basically located within the oil sands region. So the difference between these two data sets, the 3x7 kilometer sample size and the wall-to-wall is also in scale. So we map the 3x7s using the 1 to 5,000 scale, whereas the provincial scale that wall-to-wall inventory mapped is 1 to 15,000. And there are about 500 sites, the 3x7 kilometer sites within the oil sands region. So this is just a trend analysis, how it looks when you're looking at through the time on the same sample site. And you can see how it changes visually as well as in terms of the total area from one year to another. So ABMI estimates trend by delineating human footprint by feature class on an annual basis and for a series of those 3x7 kilometer samples for the entire Alberta. And based on this approach, between 1999 and 2014, total human footprint in the Athabasca Oil Sands Area was measured to increase by 3.4%. And it was mainly due to creation of the new forestry footprint, about 2%, and energy footprint, about 1% increase. And then I just calculated the same numbers for the oil sands monitoring region for the entire boundary that's displayed in this map. And it was measured to increase by 2.4%. And the increase was mainly due to the forestry footprint. It's 1.3%, and energy is 0.7%. As you can see, oh, the wrong one again. So agriculture has increased as well, but just very slightly. And then the next few slides, they actually are the examples of the data that's being used, of the human footprint data that's being used within ABMI to do further analysis and to just basically, I'm using this to demonstrate further examples of the applications. So this slide shows the sensitivity analysis that ABMI's caribou monitoring unit is developing as we speak, working with COSIA actually, and their intent was to decrease the disturbance, which is buffered human footprint in this map, as the caribou range is progressively restored through the reclamation and recovery of cutlines. So it's a modeling exercise, and the restoration is applied in audit of priority zone that group townships ranked by reduction in disturbed habitat per unit of cutlines that's being restored. So there are 5 ranges. Red Earth, Richardson, WSR, ESAR, and Cold Lake. And so I'll just go through the slides and just like showing the slides will show the restoration, modeled restoration. This slide brings me to another example of the applications of the human footprint data that we've been working on like in the past couple of months, and we've been working with the with the Science Technical Committee of the Biodiversity Management Framework, trying to calculate and assign recovery rates of the harvest areas or former cut blocks based on the recovery curves for deciduous and coniferous forest types. So basically, what we've done, we assigned for each of the polygons within the harvest area sublayer in the human footprint inventory a value, recovery value. So And we're talking right now about using that attribute as part of the deliverable for the human footprint inventory, and not just the deliverable for the biodiversity management framework, but actually now including that attribute into the human footprint inventory. And this is the last example of the application that we've been working on, and it's basically trying to delineate the catchment areas around water bodies in province of Alberta, mostly right now working on in the boreal region. And in the past, what we've done, all the water bodies and wetland sites that have been visited by ABMI in the field, they would have been buffered 250 meter using the 250 meter buffer size, and we then will interpret the human footprint within those buffers. But then we decided to investigate what would be the value of looking into an ecologically meaningful buffer or ecologically meaningful area around that wetland site. So we've been delineating the catchment areas around each of those wetland sites that have been visited in the field by ABMI. And these are the examples. So the two maps show the buffer area. On this map, it's a green boundary, and on this map, it's a very thin black boundary, but then you can see the catchment area. So like on this map on your right, or on your left, sorry, on your left, so it's more or less repeats the shape of the buffer, whereas this buffer, catchment boundary is totally different than the buffer shape.